Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this guide, I'll be talking about Kafka's best relic, light cones, team comp, rotations, pros and cons, and if you should pull for her. Here are her required materials and skill priority. For an overview on her kit, she's a hyper carry DPS unit and a dot enabler from the Nihility path. You want to run her with a secondary dot unit to get the max potential out of her kit. Though not a must but preferred. She's also skill point heavy, where it's preferred to have a skill point positive buffer. For her Eidolons, she is totally E0 sufficient. Her E1, when her talent triggers a follow-up attack, there is a 100% base chance to increase the dot damage received by the target by 30% for 2 turns, which gives a 15 to 17% damage boost. Her E2 increases dot dealt by all allies by 25%, which gives a rough 10% DPS increase. Her E4 regenerates 2 energy when an enemy target takes damage from the shock status inflicted by Kafka. For her E6, when an enemy target is inflicted with shock from her ultimate, technique, or her follow-up attack, increase the damage multiplier by 156% and lasts 1 turn longer. For her best price to performance ratio, honestly her Eidolons aren't needed at all, though the best value would be her E1 for a 15% DPS increase. How to build Kafka? There are actually 2 ways to build her. For attack Kafka, it's the most recommended one. For the body you want attack percent. For the boots you want speed. For crit Kafka, for the body you want crit damage instead. For the boots you want speed. If you're running Bronya you want attack percent. Sub-stat priority, a total of 28.2% effect hit rate, speed till 134 or 135. After that, focus on as much attack percent as possible with the highest priority. And lastly, break effect. Do note that with units like Pella, E2 Silverwolf or Gwynaphan, and especially with a future 5-star Nihility unit, which can manipulate effect hit rate, you can go for lesser effect hit rate or none at all. For E1 Kafka or her signature LC, for the substats you don't want to consider going for a crit Kafka, as you will need 44 to 66.7% effect hit rate for a 100% chance. Currently for E0 Kafka, crit has slightly higher DPS by a few percentage over attack Kafka, but that is only if you're running on a 60% plus crit rate with 160% plus crit damage build, which is hard but possible to pull off. Attack and crit Kafka are both viable. It really doesn't matter which you pick, since both of them have pretty much no difference in damage. But you never know if future dot units can buff dot damage directly, but I highly doubt that it will ever happen, as it conflicts with Kafka's kit, which doesn't make sense at all, though it's still better to run attack Kafka, as it's on the safer side, as you may still have higher damage scaling with a future 5-star Nihility dot unit, especially for players running the Fermata light cone. But if you have double S tier on crit relics and AA tier attack relic, by all means your crit relics would perform better, but do go for an attack chest piece. For players who are confused on why they should run attack Kafka, for an in-depth explanation, 50% of Kafka ability can crit, but her dot has higher damage compared to her crit abilities. In simpler terms, Jingliu's skill is 80% of her damage output, whereas Jingyuan main damage source is from his follow-up attack. Whereas Kafka damage source comes more from her dot over her crit abilities. Hence attack percent body is better even with the lower multipliers, but it doesn't mean that you should skip out on crit stats, as with attack percent body and rope you want crit rate and crit damage stats on them, as you're not able to get attack percent substats. Here's how your E0 Kafka substats should look like to maximize her damage. 30 to 40% attack is the highest you can go for. Most players are only able to hit around 30% plus attack. Don't skip out on crit stats, as her best build will be a hybrid Kafka, which has the highest damage output and it's way easier to build, with effect hit rate, speed and attack percent taking the highest priority, as it's not possible to roll everything into just attack percent and speed substat. In short, players should always slap on an attack percent chest piece. Onto her relic set. It's very straightforward. She has 3 best in slots, with 4-piece lightning and both of the new relic sets. It's recommended to farm for the one which is more universal for your account and pick the set which has better substats overall, as the damage difference between all 3 sets are way too little. In short, would recommend players to farm for the new set, as you can use either of them in their universal too. Though in future, if there's a 5-star Nihility dot unit which can do defense shred, it's better to go for prisoner set, as it will ramp up Kafka damage slightly. Though not a must, as substat is still more important. Just a tip for new players, you should never throw away your current set piece in case if they get worse substats. And now for the Planar Ornament. Main stat for the rope, you want attack % only. And for the orb, lightning damage boost. As with attack % orb, it's a 10% plus damage loss. She has 2 planar ornaments at which she can use. First is Space Sealing Station with pretty much no requirements, though you still want to hit 134 speed on Kafka for min-maxing. Second is Firmament Frontline Glamour, which is her best in slot, but you have to hit the 135 speed breakpoint, which gives you a DPS increase of 1.5% and 3.8% for 160 speed. Players should only aim for 135 speed and use units like Ruan Mei or Asta to hit the 160 speed breakpoint for a very minimal damage boost increase of 2.3% from 135 speed. It's not worth sacrificing other substats for more speed, as her overall damage would be way lower. Honestly, they're actually both similar, as the damage difference are way too little. Where substats would be more important, players should farm for whichever is more universal for their account by farming the same relic set that your other DPS units are using. Now for her light cones, I'll start from the worst to best. She actually has quite a lot of good options to go for. Any other light cones which are not mentioned will mean that they will perform worse compared to her free-to-play options. At last place we have Fermata at S5, having a damage loss of 14%, while Solitary has a damage loss of 11% compared to her signature light cone. Fermata will do better in future with a 5-star wind dot unit. Solitary Healing turns your Kafka into an erudition unit, which allows Kafka to get 2-turn ulti at most times if the enemy boss can spawn mobs, which will ramp up her damage multipliers. Both are very solid free-to-play options, which puts her signature light cone to shame. But an issue with Solitary Healing is that you want to S5 it, where most players aren't able to do it ASAP, due to the other good light cone options for their other units. Overall, would recommend players to go for Fermata. At second place we have her signature light cone. Honestly, it's not worth to pull for her signature light cone at all, unless players are lazy to build her, as her light cone gives speed. Though one issue with her signature LC is that if she goes too fast, your secondary dot unit won't be able to use their skills at all, and your team will always be on a skill point deficit. Especially with a 5-star dot unit, it's best to have all your units at the same speed, or with your support units going faster than your DPS units to maximize their max potential without missing a skill ability. Hence placing this light cone at second place. At first place it's Good Night Sleep Well, which is S1 sufficient. It will increase the damage dealt by the wearer for every debuff the target enemy has, stacking up to 3 times. Dot is also counted as a debuff. For this light cone to work at its max potential, you want to run a secondary dot unit or a debuffer with her, as Kafka is able to apply 2 debuffs by herself. Huo technique is also considered as a debuff. At S1 it's a 10% DPS loss compared to her signature LC, but with the game progressing you're able to S5 this light cone eventually if you're lucky, which will perform better than her signature light cone by 9% plus. Here are the numbers on the damage difference for the light cones. On paper, Good Night Sleep Well have very high multipliers, but players should look at the right side of the numbers for a more accurate DPS calculation. Overall, I recommend players to use what they have, and players shouldn't pull for Kafka's signature LC but her E1 instead if they must. Especially with Fermata being a really good option for a future wind dot unit. And now for her team comp and rotations. Her best sustain would be any 5-star sustain, but it's preferred to run her with Huo or Fuxuan. You should always run her with a secondary dot unit, though not a must, as you can even run her with a secondary DPS unit like Blade or Jingliu if you don't want to build 4-star dot units, or even 2 buffers in the same team unless you have a 5-star dot unit. Please don't run 3 dot units in the same team, as it's not viable due to skill point issues, and a team-wide buffer would do way better for your team damage overall. Unless in future there's a Nility dot plus defense shred unit, then it may be possible, but you may still want a buffer together. Her best buffer would be Ruan Mei or Asta, with Asta being the most F2P option, giving the most skill points for both of your dot units to use their skill every turn. Unfortunately for a lightning mono team comp, it's not going to work as well as other mono teams, though it may change in future when Star Rail releases more units. For Kafka's pros and cons. Pros: she's a double S tier unit. She's a 2-in-1 unit, which makes her more future-proof due to her being a dot enabler. She's the best lightning DPS unit even over Jingyuan. She's easy to build for most players due to not needing high crit stats at all, which is something like Hyper Bloom in Genshin. She has good design. Cons: she's skill point negative. She still may get outscaled in future due to players not needing the dot playstyle. She's harder to build for min-maxing. So should you pull for Kafka? Honestly, I may get some hate for this, but she's really not needed even as a dot enabler in Star Rail, as other standard DPS units damage-wise can do the same job as her even without enabling dots. If you need a lightning DPS unit for pure damage for elemental coverage, then no. As a future lightning DPS unit will outscale her in DPS or even design-wise, especially with 2 new 5-star units coming out every month, as I have seen a lot of players dropping her after getting FOMO'd. So I believe that players should pull for Kafka only if they like her design or the dot playstyle and not care about her getting outscale. After all, with any limited 5-star DPS unit you're able to clear the hardest content in the game easily, as long as you have elemental coverage with a good 5-star sustain. In short, you should only pull for her if you like her design and if you like the dot playstyle instead of future proofing. Though don't get me wrong, as dot team comps definitely have high potential. And that's it for this guide.